Chapter 1251, Chained. It's not Dark Angel Sasrier. The projection of Inuni has been eroded by the power that surged out from the Giant King's residence, becoming a monster that I can't understand at the moment. Furthermore, it looks like it can exist for a long period of time. Perhaps there's a bit of Sasrier's will involved in this. With his left hand covering his face, Klein allowed the worms of spirit to burrow through the gaps in his fingers freely. What he couldn't understand the most was something else. He had clearly opened the palace where the Dark Angel lay slumber, but the deities and kings of angels showed no reaction. According to Klein's imagination, when the surging sea gushed out, be it the true creator, the god of knowledge and wisdom, blasphemer Ammon, or Ammon's brother who ultimately hid behind the scenes, they should have immediately descended or appeared to confirm Dark Angel Sasrier's present state or snatch whatever corresponding items. To his surprise, the entire Giant King's court remained completely silent. No external powers exerted any influence. Could it be that they are still waiting for me to enter the Giant King's residence and to come into contact with that deputy of heaven? The true creator said to meet Sasrier. My spirit body and physical body haven't recovered from the corrosion, which means that the true creator's goal has yet to be achieved. Haha. As Klein's thoughts raced, he realized that he was unable to control his emotions, be it anger, sadness, worry, or depression. He couldn't help but pull the corners of his mouth up and let out a scoff. The only thing he was glad about was that this didn't affect his brain. He could still think and use all sorts of beyonder powers, but sometimes his madness would suddenly be aggravated, turning him rash and aggressive. I wonder if the demigod of the mind has any way to treat this situation. In any case, the sealed artifacts or beyonder characteristics that I can summon can't do it. This is a result of an incomplete spirit. If I don't resolve my severed shadow, I probably won't be able to completely recover. However, perhaps there are methods that can allow me to temporarily return to normal. For example, create a virtual persona to make up for the incompleteness. Unfortunately, I can't enter Sephra Castle. Klein's thoughts were in a mess as the scenes that surfaced in his mind gradually vanished. He then picked up the half-top hat that had dropped to the ground and wore it. Then, through the huge glass window formed from ground orange gems, he observed the changes in the Giant King's court. Unlike before, an illusory sun appeared high in the sky, allowing the magnificent building complex situated in the frozen sunset to enjoy the sun at noon. The troll statues that stood guard in the various palaces seemed to be draped with a cloak weaved out of shadows. Inuni, who had a pair of black, illusory wings on his back, and the shadow that originally belonged to Klein jumped over the railing and glided towards him. Klein's gaze froze as he subconsciously took a few steps forward, intending to fight the enemy. But very quickly, he snapped back to his senses and checked his current state. He quickly retreated to the ancient elevator, pulled the switch, and landed back in the barren tunnel. Then, with blink, he appeared near the waning forest and ran all the way to the edge of the Giant King's court. His intuition told him that in his current state, he had no means of defeating the mutated Inuni and his separated shadow. Of course, he had the confidence if it was just the latter. When he arrived at the edge of the radiant sunlight, he turned and saw that Inuni and his shadow hadn't chased after him. It was as though there was a limit to their range of activity. There's no way to leave the Giant King's residence, or should I say, be too far away from Dark Angel Sasrier. Just as this thought flashed through his mind, Klein saw the illusionary sun atop leap from the center to the west. The dusk's colors once again enveloped the divine kingdom. Klein carefully observed all of this and was in no hurry to leave the Giant King's court. Not long after, the illusory sun plunged into the palace where Dark Angel Sasrier slumbered. Darkness became the ruler of the Giant King's court. The darkness was different from the one found on a normal night. There was no moon or starlight, only blurry shadows. Standing in this darkness, Klein had a nagging feeling that someone was clinging to him from behind. However, he clearly knew that it was an illusion and didn't turn around recklessly. A few minutes later, the illusory sun rose, and the light of dawn dispersed the darkness. The power that surged out from the Dark Angel's chamber has changed the Giant King's court despite it being an ancient divine kingdom. It really is a power that's close to that of a true deity. At the very least, it controls a uniqueness. But which pathway's uniqueness would it be? The generated changes include blazing sun, darkness, degeneration, and mutation. This is a little contradictory. It doesn't seem like the result of a single uniqueness. Besides, the uniqueness of the sun pathway is definitely with the eternal blazing sun. The shadow and degeneration is brought about by darkness, which is undoubtedly with the true creator. When I opened the door, I saw an illusory, pitch-black, viscous ocean. It's related to the Chaos Sea. Klein shook his head as he continued observing. This continued on as he waited for the City of Silver's expedition team to rendezvous with him. Backland, at the border of the city. As soon as Audrey entered, she discovered that the fog had become unusually thick. Visibility had been reduced to 5 meters. The howling winds swept through the fog, bringing a sense of clarity from time to time. However, it was soon filled with surging whiteness. Audrey's eyes suddenly turned golden, allowing her to see even further. As she carefully treaded, the fog in front of her suddenly became much thinner. At the same time, her beyonder powers suffered a retrogression. The weakening of mysticism. The concepts and information previously mentioned by Mr. World flashed across her mind. Boom, booms, boom. Multiple salvos from Backland fired ahead, causing the shells to leave trails of red, blue, silver, or black in their wake as they bombarded the enemy's base. However, in the next second, these shells encountered invisible barriers and exploded in midair, making the transparent wall tremble. At this moment, a rather blurry figure appeared in the distant, thick fog. He was in human form, but he was more than 10 meters tall. His torso and waist each had 2 arms extending out as he emitted a rich darkness. For some reason, as the figure that seemed to arise from a legend appeared, the Fasak and Inti's allied forces base stirred. Every soldier and officer there seemed to have returned to their childhood. They were walking alone on the dark road with no one around them. Everything was silent. They felt uneasy deep down. The fear of the unknown stemmed from the fear of their imaginations. Instantly, they broke down and turned to flee. At this moment, radiant sunlight shone on them, allowing them to see light and bringing them courage. However, there were still a small number of soldiers who were unable to control themselves. They kept shouting, "Mommy," or a particular woman's name in their bids to escape from the battlefield. Bangs, bangs, bang. The soldiers fell to the ground amidst repeated gunshots. One by one, they bloomed with blood-colored flowers. They landed on the ground, turning motionless after slightly twitching. No one cared what their names were, nor did anyone know of their past. Right on the heels of that, under the commanding officer's orders, the invisible barrier that enveloped the Intis and Fasak allied forces was dispelled. Crimson-red flaming spears were thrown out towards the lone base as though they could blot out the sky. Just as the flaming spears approached their target, they scattered in a sudden bout of chaos. They stabbed into the ground, creating one pitch-black hole after another. It was the first time Audrey was seeing such a large-scale usage of beyonder powers. Momentarily stunned, she couldn't help but recall the people she knew and the roles they played in this battle. Glaint and the other young nobles had joined the army and took on the roles of officers at different ranks. They were scattered all over the battlefield and could be killed at any moment. The magician had left Backland with Judgment's family and was hiding in a small city in Eastchester County. As a middle-ranking member of MI9, Judgment was made to covertly defend against infiltration by the Beyonders from Fasak, Intis, and other countries. The official Beyonders, led by the Star, had locked down the various cathedrals of the Church of Steam, maintaining the stability of the city. Saint Anthony and the other demigods of the Church of Evernight, the Church of Storms, the royal family, and the military began to set up the last line of defense in Backland. The Sanguine had remained neutral the entire time. A few seconds later, Audrey gathered her thoughts and prepared to use psychological invisibility to sneak into the enemy's camp to spread mental plague. Suddenly, her spiritual perception stirred as she cast her gaze to a spot further away. In the thick fog, a rather thick and blurry tentacle wrapped around countless silver bolts of lightning and quickly extended to a certain location of the Allied forces' base. A feather burning with golden flames fell. In the depths of the thick fog, a huge grayish-blue palm reached out, holding a silver broadsword. The fog sea, away from the safe sea route. Countless bolts of lightning struck the surface of the sea. Waves surged and crashed heavily. Bernadette's dawn was constantly being thrown into the sky, making it seem extremely minute under the might of the elements. It looked like it would sink at any moment. Queen Mystic stood at the bow of the ship, calmly taking in all of this. From time to time, she would use the Emperor's new clothes and other fairy tale magic to maintain the balance of the boat. Her gaze pierced through the terrifying storm in search of the suspected primitive island. After some reorganizing, Colin Iliad led Derek, Lovia, and the other members of the expedition team out of Afternoon Town Camp. They followed the path up the mountain and entered the giant king's court. What surprised them was that the frozen dusk had changed. Bright sunlight illuminated every corner. "Where's the helper you invited?" Colin Iliad controlled his alarm and turned to ask Derek Berg. Just as Derek was about to speak, he suddenly saw a figure walk out from a half-collapsed tower. The figure wore a black trench coat and a silk top hat. The right side of his face was cut, cold, and stiff. The left side of his face had transparent, wriggling maggots that kept crawling.